Welcome to Boo Crew Case Files. I'm Bree Schroeder, your host. I'm a paranormal investigator out of Spokane, Washington. I've had paranormal experiences since I was a young adult, living in a couple different buildings that experienced unexplained events. Many of these unexplained events piqued my interest in the paranormal. But this was before TV shows were producing shows about the paranormal and the unexplained. Years later, I began developing devices to capture and communicate with spirits, as well as searching for teams and locations to explore. At this time, I can say I've been investigating the paranormal for about 7 years. Probably one of my most memorable investigations is one I shared with my co-host, who I'll introduce in a moment. It was Halloween a few years back. We investigated and stayed overnight in an old historic Victorian home in Colfax, Washington. While setting up our equipment, you could hear the team setting up the devices and discussing the activity. What happened around us, though, was a residual conversation that involved multiple people and a child. I found this compelling as there were no children in the home, and the voices were not any of ours. While that was impressive to me, it was even more mind-blowing that one of the female voices actually addressed the name of the woman who was known to be the last person to live in the home in the 1960s. That investigation included my friend and special co-host on this episode of Boo Crew Case Files, Mr. Charles Johnson. Charles, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Charles, do you remember that investigation in Colfax?
I do.
What do you remember about it?
Just the Victorian theme, just the oldness. As you mentioned, we caught a lot of good evidence, but as I remember, it was all, or most of it anyway, was when we were just setting up equipment or not expecting it. And upon review, that's when, as in general, that's when you don't expect it, that's when you catch it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely you go into a location knowing of activity or hearing people's experiences, and when you walk out after having a couple hours or an overnight investigation like that was, it's pretty mind-blowing, some of the activity that you don't hear with your own ears, but is happening while you're right there. Not. Sometimes
it's almost like they want to be in the conversation.
Yeah, there's that as well. All right, Charles, you and I have known each other several years now. We've done a lot of investigations, but for those who don't know you, can you tell us a little about yourself, please?
I would be glad to. My name's Charles Johnson. I was born and raised in Kentucky, and as you may know, Kentucky has a lot of rich history and hauntings and UFOs and Bigfoot. I grew up on In Search of there and Unsolved Mysteries, and I always went to the 133 section of the library. That was the Dewey Decimal System. That was the occult section. But anyway, when I got here in Spokane, it was 2007, and that's when I started actively pursuing the paranormal and actually investigating. And I can say Spokane has given me that. It has given me a lot of good opportunities, and it's got a lot of rich history and hauntings, and so I'm very thankful for that.
Definitely. It's nice to have you here in Spokane. So 2007 is about when you started investigating paranormal?
Yes, that's, like I said before, I've always been interested in the unknown. I would read the books, watch the TVs, but it wasn't until I got here in Spokane that I actually started putting boots on the ground and doing some research.
So you've always been interested in the paranormal, the unexplained, Sasquatch, UFOs. What led you to be interested in that, if I may?
You know, I can't even actually put a finger on it. I don't know if it's just the desire to understand things. When somebody says that can't be, I like to question. I think it's just the search for truth and understanding.
I would definitely say if somebody asked me that question, I'd have a hard time answering it, because for me it's very similar. I've just always been interested, and then having the experiences in the haunted apartments that I lived in definitely just solidified that we're not alone, and I need more answers to what I'm hearing at times.
The earliest memory I can have is watching the shows on TV and the books in the library, time lapse series on the unexplained and things like that.
What's your favorite place to investigate, or where did you have your most favorite investigation?
Unfortunately, I've only been there once, but I have a deep fascination with the Bell Witch Cave and the house and that area down in there. That's always been a fascination for me. St. Ignatius Hospital will always be near and dear to my heart. I went to Waverly Hills a couple of times. That's always excellent. And just, as long as I can investigate, I don't care if it's in a parking lot.
What the listeners don't understand is that we're actually sitting in the middle of Fairmont Memorial Cemetery in Spokane, Washington. And if you're hearing birds chirping, it's because we are out in nature, almost in a parking lot.
Yeah, not far. Yeah. There's some concrete over there.
Bunch of headstones.
And the birds would not cooperate in being silent, so we tried.
We tried to mute them, but I'm sorry, no luck. We actually almost got dive bombed by one a few moments ago. It was quite crazy. What tools or devices do you use when investigating the paranormal?
Some of my favorites is just a digital audio recorder trying to catch EVPs. I'm always love to get out the SLS camera. Right now, my big thing is spirit boxes and ITC research.
There's a lot out there as far as opportunities.
Really, there's all kinds of. Our ancestors would not understand all the options we have now.
I'm kind of curious what technology is going to look like 40, 50 years from now. What's that technology going to look like later? We've got devices like the Ovulus, which is manufactured by Bill Chappell, or digital dowsing. That piece of equipment has that scientific piece where it will pick up changes in temperature, humidity, static field. It'll generate words. What do you think that's going to look like? And
it just blows my mind with things like the particle collider, the CERN, with headlines of Google's AI hiring a lawyer to present it's real. It's going to get crazy. And I think, like Terminator, we're all in trouble. I really do. But as far as the paranormal, I think in the future we're going to have a direct line to the other side. I think that's I think we already do, but a more a better one. It may even have visuals to the other side someday. Who knows?
That'd be quite impressive. I know you've rabbit holed in your research and you've come across some information about some sort of a company or group that's trying to create text messages with the other side.
Right. The project is called the Soul Phone, and like everything, you have to be careful. There's a lot of fraud out there, but I'm willing to listen. But their claims is they're working on a device that will have a direct communication to the other side. So we'll see. According to them, they're really close. So it's exciting, but I've been let down before, so we'll see.
What's your most interesting experience or evidence that you've collected while investigating?
So over the years, I've gotten a lot of good responses through the ghost box, but the one that really sticks out in my mind was early on. We were investigating an apartment in Brown's Addition. The couple agreed to leave us there and do our thing. They said, be careful, watch the closet door. It opens by itself. Well, being a very new person to this, I wrote it off and said, yeah, whatever. So as soon as they left, we shut the door, set our equipment down, and lo and behold, the closet door opened all by itself, and we were all filled with a cold energy.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, being a good little investigator, we shut it, and we tried to walk up and down the hallway, making sure it wasn't our weight, making it pop open, but we could never recreate it. So even more than the door opening was the cold energy that we felt.
That's crazy. Honestly, and as an investigator, it's really, really important that you don't just take your first response in an audio form or your first door opening. You have to think through things and debunk it or think logically. With the spirit box communicating or pulling from radio stations, is it something that could be said on the radio? So, I mean, definitely those are some big aspects when we're doing this.
Yeah, you've got to be open-minded and skeptical at the same time. But we need to know the true meaning of skeptical and as not being a non-believer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So I've kind of toyed with this, and we've spoke about it over the past few years. When it comes down to investigating and getting responses, it's always so interesting to get residual conversation or residual, comments, responses. There's also a fascination with intelligent. What would you prefer to get?
For me, the intelligent responses would be the more preferred, the more interesting. Not that I wouldn't mind a residual answer, but yeah, definitely the intelligent. But it's also a catch-22, because once you get intelligent, that means something is communicating with you, and what that is, that's a whole nother ball of wax.
It really is, and that's something that I think you and I may pursue as we continue investigations in the future.
Sometimes Aunt Martha is not Aunt Martha.
So true, and sometimes all you get is residual messages. So it's.
So what would be for you? What would be the top indicator that was residual?
Well,
would it be like if you were doing a EVP question and you got a response that had nothing to do, or a voice?
I think in that aspect presented, you're trying to get a response to a question of what's your name, and maybe you get, I'm the nurse. I mean, is that answering your question, or is that somebody coming into the room and announcing who they are, and only that residual capture is that person saying, I'm the nurse? I mean, it's just one of those things that I play around with. I'm fascinated with both. I mean, intelligent is one of those things that's your takeaway. You want to know that you've actually spoken to something or somebody on the other side. But the residual is super fascinating to me because it's thought to be that everything we do creates energy and an impression in time. And that just constantly plays on a loop. So this piece here that we're sharing right now, every day at this time, or maybe not every day, but on this date, at this time, years forward, this will be happening as the energy imprint, and will somebody be able to capture us down the road? But it's a never-ending quest.
It really is.
I mean, even if we do an investigation at St. Ignatius and we get confirmation that we're speaking to somebody, that doesn't stop us. That just gives us an adrenaline rush to keep going and keep pursuing this and looking forward to more conversation or the unexplained.
And even it reaches out to topics like deja vu, portals. I mean, whole gamut of different, and they all seem to be tied together some way. They all have an impact, and I think as physics advances, we're going to start understanding, and the paranormal in the future will not be the paranormal and unknown. It would be another branch of science.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's definitely something that, we keep pursuing and we're going to hopefully get closer to, but I don't think I'll ever stop looking.
Never.
As a paranormal investigator, you often have to think outside the box by getting creative and trying different experiments. So I thought, what happens if you tell a story about a person or an event and then attempt to communicate? Would telling the story generate enough energy to allow for spirit communication? If so, would that communication be intelligent or residual? Charles, what are your thoughts on this experiment?
Well, I think it's just a fascinating concept. Anytime you can use a trigger object, whether physical or by words of bringing up memories, names, and you put it out there into the environment, I think that stands a great chance of producing good results. And then once you have those results, you can try your best to determine whether it's intelligent or residual.
Yeah,
but I think it's an incredible idea.
Well, I'm eager to get in, so I think since we're here, we should then go ahead and move forward with telling the story we have.
Let's do it.
Or I guess I should say, Charles, I have a story for you.
I love story time.
Well, I probably won't tell it as well as some of the people we know that tell stories, but I'll give it a go. The year was 1862, just about 1 year into the Civil War. A young Frank Johnson enlists in Company M, 11th New York Volunteer Cavalry. Mr. Johnson's unit was assigned to bodyguard duties for President Lincoln. Newspaper report Mr. Johnson's duties as assigned to the unit included escorting the president, dispatching messages to the front during the war, and patrolling Washington, D.C. One report stated, during the summer of 1862, Mr. Lincoln took up his abode at the soldier's home, about 5 miles from the city, to and from which the White House he had to be carefully escorted every day, a task accomplished by Mr. Johnson's company. While the Civil War ended on April 9, 1865, just 6 days later, while in a crowded theater, President Lincoln was assassinated. Now, there are no stories or documentation that I could find that gave details or statements from Mr. Johnson about this event. There is a possibility that as Mr. Johnson was still assigned to guarding President Lincoln, he may have been present for the shooting. Fast forward to 1880, where Mr. Johnson takes a foreman of general construction job for the Northern Pacific Railroad Company in Spokane, Washington. Mr. Johnson moved his family to Spokane, where he began a career as a well-known and admired builder and architect, building various buildings within the Spokane area. Some of these landmarks include the first railroad freight depot, the first Catholic church in Spokane, their first building at Gonzaga College, the west wing of the original Sacred Heart Hospital, the Pacific Hotel, the Holly Building, as well as several other homes. Mr. Johnson served as a Spokane City Council member and also had a membership to the Elks Lodge and the Eagles. Now, we are standing at Mr. Johnson's gravesite in Fairmont Memorial Cemetery. Before we begin to attempt to communicate with him, I'd like to thank Mr. Johnson for his service to our country and all his efforts and hard work in Spokane.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Johnson. We appreciate it. I'm excited. This man is a hero, and I'm very excited to be a part of this project.
You know, I did some additional research looking through newspaper articles and came across a bunch of stories talking about Mr. and Mrs. Johnson hosting huge gatherings, one that was so extravagant that it brought out some of the elite in Spokane to their home to party. What do you think about that? It was in Brown's edition, apparently.
Oh, I bet it was the event of the year.
It was the talk of the town.
You can only imagine.
Yeah. Well, at this time, we're going to go ahead and try to communicate with Mr. Johnson. We're going to start our investigation with Mr. Johnson and see if we're able to communicate with him. We'll be using the Phasma box in this investigation. Now, the Phasma box is software that can be found for Windows-based computers or tablets. This software allows for spirit communication. What the Phasma box does is it accesses internet radio stations at a quick rate of speed, which is intended to allow for spirit to communicate by manipulating the audio. As it does flip through the station, the communication or responses are received. It's important as an investigator to maintain a logical mind. What I mean by this is, it is important to consider the response as it may have been potentially said on the radio, but it raises the question, is it spirit that's trying to communicate? Now, the investigation here will begin with the computer being turned on to battery only, no internet signal, no Bluetooth, nothing that can interfere or possibly discredit our findings. Mr. Johnson, Mr. Frank Johnson. My name is Bree. This is my friend Charles.
Hi there.
We're looking to see if we can communicate with you. Frank, are you here?
What?
Frank, I have some questions. I hope you can answer for me. Frank, you were hired to protect an important person. Can you tell me who that person was?
That will worth going back and checking.
Another example.
From
The way that these are still.
Why were you protecting him?
To be steel.
Frank, what was happening that required the protection?
Sorry now, but
What was your job?
Frank, what did you do in Spokane?
Who built the railroad freight depot?
What did you build in 1886?
How old were you when you enlisted in the Civil War?
Frank, what was your company when you enlisted in the Civil War? Alright, so we had a little technical difficulty, Charles. The computer overheated because it is about 90 degrees, 80 degrees here in Spokane right now. Alright, well, we'll go ahead and get back into this recording for the Phasma Bucks, but we may circle back around and just talk a little bit more about Lincoln and see, because there's not a definite answer about Mr. Johnson's involvement, if he was still part of the bodyguard or the company protecting Lincoln at the time of his assassination. We also don't know because he did go to New Orleans at a point. So I think we throw out our questions and just kind of focus around Lincoln and what we know. Frank, can you tell us again who you were protecting?
The flashing bell. It was what's right here?
Frank, were you in the theater on April 15th?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Frank, do you know who shot President Lincoln? Did it just say Wilkes Booth?
Very well could have. That definitely deserves to go back and listen.
But that's
Attention.
Deserves attention. Frank, did you just say it was John Wilkes Booth?
Yes, well, should
Frank, are you talking to us?
it's
take the box.
yes, and clean it.
The female that is talking to us, can you tell us your name?
Is that
Who was that?
like both? Or are you still going?
Frank, as I understand, you also were in Gettysburg. Any comments about that?
Definitely.
Frank, what battle were you in that you were shot?
Oral history. Sent you on the way. The president.
Frank, is your family with you?
Geraldine.
Frank, what happened on April 15th, 1865?
In what?
The virus and
Should it thus?
Shouldn't ask.
well,
Well,
Well, go ahead. Frank, I want to open up the floor here where the lawn.
Termination.
Are there any messages you have or anything you'd like to say?
just in the last now.
Frank, thank you for speaking with us. We do appreciate it and responding to our questions. All right, Charles, that wraps up the investigation for the Boo Crew case files for Frank Johnson. Now, I did have some inaccurate dates, so I want to clear those up here for those historians that might be listening. I'm sorry. The true date of the shooting at Ford Theater was on April 14th, 1865. So a little bit of a hiccup there. The actual date of death was the 15th. Also, Frank Johnson passed away in October 1929. But it was a great investigation, Charles. What are your thoughts having a night to sleep on it?
Looking back, it was a very powerful one, I think. Just so much, even just in the beginning, so rich in history, and then with the results we got, it just amazing.
I still just can't believe that we right out the gate got that response of Lincoln when asking, who did you protect? There were some other findings within it. We found this clip, which, listening to it, it almost seems like we're getting a response when asking who built the railroad freight depot. Take a listen.
Who built the railroad freight depot?
All right, Charles, what do you think of that clip? Do you hear a response within that question?
I do. I mean, to me, it's pretty plain and obvious to me.
It definitely sounds like we're getting a male response saying me when asking who built that railroad depot.
And it kind of reminds me of an older gentleman, kind of a rough B type, a strong masculine voice.
Most definitely. Now, we also got this clip here when we asked who shot Lincoln. I initially said, did that say Wilkes Booth? I don't think I can honestly say one way or another that it is saying Wilkes Booth. However, it seems as though when I call out and ask, did you say Wilkes Booth, there may be a male responding that says John Booth or something within it. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that real quick. Frank, do you know who shot President Lincoln? Did it just say Wilkes Booth?
Very well could have. That definitely deserves to go back and listen.
Deserves attention. Frank, did you just say it was John Wilkes Booth?
Yes, should it?
All right, Charles. So that one itself, sort of hard to say for sure if it said Wilkes Booth, but there's something there at the end, I think, and I can't put my finger on it, but it seems like it's answering us.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a direct response, and I think that's definitely worth taking a listen to, because it seems to be an intelligent response to our question.
I agree. We also caught this other clip here, this last one. There weren't any children around us, and I found this to be a little out of sorts, but one that I wanted to at least include, and maybe it was because the ice cream truck was behind us quite frequently. I'm not sure what it was, but let's see if you can hear this voice. Check it out. All right, Charles, what'd you hear?
I heard a little child's voice, and I don't know the meaning of it or how it fits in, but it's so plain. It's one of my favorite ones. It was obvious when you sent it to me and let me listen to it. I heard it right off the bat.
Charles, we had one other clip that I'm scratching my head over. We asked the question, were you in the theater? Because there's no actual documentation indicating if Frank Johnson was still actively guarding the president at that time that he was at the Ford Theater, or if he was reassigned to New Orleans or otherwise. So we asked the question, and there's some interesting audio, so I'm just going to go ahead and play that, and then Charles and I will talk a little bit about it, so check it out. Frank, were you in the theater on April 15th?
Yes, it is, yeah.
All right, Charles, that was a little bizarre of a response. I don't think I've heard the Phasma box or really any device make that sound before. It sounded like drumming.
Yeah, if I remember right, I mean, yesterday's been so long ago, but I think we heard it at the same time, and both kind of looked at each other, and it was a
drum motion.
Yeah, it was a very odd. I mean, I think that even more than the drumming was just the weirdness, because I mean, that's not something usually you hear through the devices.
Yeah, definitely not a frequent sound or something that you come across often. I know that one other time using the Phasma box at the St. Ignatius Hospital down in Colfax, we heard what sounded like church bells or some sort of a indicator, and later when we caught up with the others in the building, they said that they received the same audio clip, and it sounded like it was right around the same time, but they interpreted that as the sound of a baby being born. So
interesting.
Maybe there's something that the Phasma box can tune into that we'll find out as we continue to explore the Boo Crew case files.
Right. It's definitely a very interesting clip, and just the uniqueness of that sound makes you think, yeah, there's something to that.
And really, where did it come from? If it is responding or acknowledging the question itself, what is it trying to imply? What does that stand for? So we're going to leave that up to interpretation for you, the listener, but something that we just found a little strange.
Yeah, for sure, and it definitely fits the time period, so you can't rule that out or just write it off as imagination or whatever.
I agree. And of course, who can forget, Charles, that icing on the cake? I mean, the holy grail of catches, I think.
It really is the holy grail. I mean, you do not get a better... I mean, you don't get a direct response as strong as that talking to the living. I mean, it's just like in your face.
That's super mind-blowing. I mean, as a paranormal investigator, and you said it best yesterday, I mean, we've been doing this for a long time, and we don't want to be dramatic about it, but it's not every time you can actually go into a location or go into any environment and try to communicate and get such a amazing response and just right out the gate and so loud and clear. It was just crazy.
I think it's important for a couple reasons. Number one, it was a direct response. Number two, it was crystal clear. I mean, on both counts, it's just amazing.
Yeah, it was an awesome catch. So in case you missed it, I'm not sure you had or have any way to miss it. I mean, we've played it a few times, but take a listen right as we begin the investigation to see if we can communicate with Frank Johnson. Frank, you were hired to protect an important person. Can you tell me who that person was? Wow, Charles, every time I hear it, I'm just like, chills, shivers.
It really does. It gives me chills just thinking about it and listening to it. It's just an amazing piece of evidence, and I'm so glad we got the opportunity to catch it.
I agree. And I don't know, you've been to Mr. Johnson's grave far more times than me. You actually introduced me to it, but in the 3-4 times that I've been there, I mentioned it briefly, I never had a device go off. I never caught an EVP. I never had a spirit box response. I mean, I think one day in summer a couple of years back, we hung around the grave for probably about 30, 40 minutes and
Right.
nothing came up. I mean, this was just incredible. It raises the question, though, telling the story, does it give energy for the communication? So what are your thoughts now?
I think it does. Anytime you use something like for a trigger object, whether we were we to play Civil War music or the music of the time, that might have had an effect. But anytime you introduce something that person was familiar with, whether they lived through the tragedy or happiness or whatever, it's a very strong possibility that might elicit a response.
Definitely. It was, I don't know, it just makes me wonder if the experiment is doing as I thought. Now, final question here for you, and I'm on the fence, but I think that I can say yes. Do you think we were communicating with Frank Johnson?
You know, I would have to say yes. I mean, you do have to keep in mind the possibility of other spirits pretending to be the person you're talking to. I guess that's always a possibility.
Sure.
But I mean, there's no way to really. We don't understand enough to be able to say for sure. But deep down, I think it was him. I really do.
Well, Charles, I want to thank you so much for being part of the Frank Johnson Boo Crew file here. I look forward to doing more investigations with you and just getting out and seeing what we could find.
Well, thank you for having me, and I look forward to a long, productive relationship.
What an awesome Boo Crew case file here for Frank Johnson. Thanks for listening. I'm Bree Schroeder, and a special thanks to my special co-host, Charles Johnson. Always great working with him. Now, if you heard something that we didn't hear, or if you have a story to share, please email me at boocrew.pnw@gmail.com. Now, coming up in future Boo Crew case files, we'll go ahead and dive into more history of Spokane, founding fathers, as well as some dark history. And don't forget, we do have upcoming episodes for the St. Ignatius Hospital, which is coming up real soon. Thanks for listening.
If you'd like to come on a tour at St. Ignatius, go to colfaxhauntedhospital.com and grab some tickets and come and see us.